Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever been completely trapped in a conversation with someone who's, trying just a little too hard to convince you of their genius? Well, today we're unpacking some pretty brutal psychology truths. We're going to dive deep into the exact cognitive indicators that separate the folks who just put on a grand theatrical show from the people who possess genuine foundational intellect. All right, let's just dive right into this. We live in this crazy, overstimulated world, right? It's a landscape of nonstop digital performance where loud confidence, rapid-fire talking, and those big, complex words often mask a total lack of depth. But psychology shows us that looking smart and actually being smart are two completely different games. One is just a practice performance meant to intimidate you, while the other is this quiet, ongoing process of discovering the truth. So let's jump into Section 1, the illusion of intelligence. Why style can never replace substance. Here's the hard truth. Real genius, it is absolutely not about dominating a conversation. Think about that fake smart persona for a second, someone who relies super heavily on an aggressive vocabulary and sheer volume just to look superior to everyone else in the room. Now, contrast that with genuine intelligence. Real smarts rely on deep thinking patterns and an absolute rock-solid security in admitting when they're wrong. Because, look, anyone can copy the aesthetic of intelligence, but you really can't fake a truth-seeking mind. Moving on to Section 2, how real intelligence sounds. The power of simplicity and precise questions. So, what are you actually hearing when you're communicating with someone who is truly intelligent? The contrast here is fascinating. Think of that one coworker who uses $5 words in a totally simple email just to sound important. Fake smart people, they use volume and complexity as a shield, making these long-winded speeches full of corporate jargon just to avoid being found out. But the genuinely intelligent, they don't give speeches. They ask incredibly precise questions. They're natural pattern hunters who are constantly looking for the target, asking, hey, what am I missing here, to identify gaps faster than anyone else in the room. And that brings us to this amazing concept. Tactical simplification. Literally anyone can throw a thesaurus at you to sound important, right? But psychology shows that true, deep understanding allows a person to just strip away all that fluff. It's kind of like that old concept often attributed to Einstein. If you truly get it, you can explain it to a 6-year-old. It's all about translating the incredibly complex into the crystal clear. I absolutely love this thought. It just hits so hard. Real intelligence is profoundly generous. A fake smart person wants you to be confused so they can swoop in and look like the savior. But a genuinely smart person, they actually want to make you feel smart so you can help them solve the problem. They're aiming to create clarity for everyone in the room rather than fiercely protecting a fragile ego. All right, Section 3. Escaping the ego trap. Separating identity from being right. Let's take a look at what happens when things get, well, a little uncomfortable. When they're faced with contradictory evidence, the fake smart person completely panics. They deflect, they argue, and they treat new data like a literal personal attack because they just cannot handle being wrong. The truly intelligent, though, they simply update their beliefs. They value absolute accuracy way over protecting their own image. They treat new information as a missing puzzle piece rather than a threat. Psychologists actually have a term for this trap, and it's called cognitive rigidity. And honestly, it is an exhausting cycle that fake smart people fall into every single day. Because their entire identity is wrapped up in being the smartest person in the room, any piece of contradictory evidence just shatters them. They're rigid, and because of that, their ego is incredibly fragile. Now, in direct contrast to that, real intelligence is rooted in intellectual humility. This is what gives you the incredible superpower to simply say, you know what? I don't know, without your ego collapsing or feeling inferior at all. You don't need to pretend you have absolute certainty, because you fundamentally trust your own ability to learn, to adapt, and to eventually figure the whole thing out. Which leads us to Section 4, the unseen thinking process. What happens beneath the surface? So, how does a highly intelligent brain actually process incoming data? Well, most people process events in a straight line, and they end up hitting a wall because they get stuck on surface-level, pretty insignificant details. High IQ minds operate totally differently. They see the world as interconnected systems, kind of like atoms orbiting a nucleus, and this allows them to zoom way out and predict domino effects that other people completely miss. To pull this off, you need something called metacognitive IQ. And this is literally one of the rarest forms of intelligence on the planet. It means you aren't just forming thoughts, you're actually watching yourself think. So while the fake smart folks are busy trying to convince everyone else of their brilliance, the truly intelligent are busy monitoring their own biases and questioning their own logic. This all builds into a daily practice called cognitive detachment, and it happens in 3 rapid-fire steps. First, they step back from their immediate reaction. Second, they observe their own emotions like a third-party referee. And third, they catch their own logical errors before speaking. They don't just react, they filter, they analyze, and they course correct in real time. And finally, Section 5, becoming hard to fool, the ultimate takeaway for your own life. Okay, so how do you actually rewire your brain using these psychological truths? It really comes down to these core pillars. Seek clarity over complexity in absolutely everything you do. Let go of that cognitive rigidity and maintain adaptability in your beliefs. Prioritize your personal growth through honest feedback, and always value the truth over your digital performance. Remember, real intelligence doesn't need a performance. It shows up consistently in how you grow, not how you perform. I want you to take just a second here to act as a mirror. Look at these signs again. Which of these psychological traits did you instantly recognize in your daily interactions with your colleagues or your friends? Or, if we're being truly intellectually humble here, which ones did you maybe recognize in yourself? I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Literally anyone can memorize fancy phrases. Anyone can imitate confidence. But the true test of your mind is whether you're willing to stop focusing on looking smart so you can genuinely become impossible to fool. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep asking the right questions.